We're going to continue with Marion Goldstein, who comes to us from CCT, Center for Children Technology at EDC better. And we're very excited about the Possible Worlds project they have been running there.
Great. Okay, thank you, Jan. As Jan said, my name is Marion Goldstein. I'm from Education Development Center, Center for Children and Technology, where we've established a National Research and Development Center on Instructional Technology. The work I'll talk about is part of a 5-year research and development project called Possible Worlds, which is funded by the Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences. The goal of Possible Worlds is to develop and test 4 game modules for use in middle school science classrooms. The games that we develop are for use on the Nintendo DS, and when I refer to a game module, which I will many times during this presentation, I'm referring to the digital game on the Nintendo as well as accompanying materials that we develop for use in classrooms that go with that game. And our interest in this project is to figure out how games can play an instructional role that regular teachers in run-of-the-mill classrooms recognize and value. So rather than exploring transformational models that require teachers to do drastically different things than they ordinarily do, we want to create games and accompanying materials that respond to teachers' specific instructional needs, that complement their existing practices, and that play productive roles that are in concert with the materials and with the instructional approaches that they already use. We also want to respond to the challenges that students struggle with in the middle grades. And science learning in middle school is really hard for a lot of kids. Often for the first time, students are asked to consider and to manipulate multiple variables and to build complex understandings of abstract concepts and processes that underlie their empirical experiences. And in many cases, the prior knowledge that they bring into the classroom all of a sudden serves as obstacles to learning. Students have misconceptions about a lot of different scientific phenomena, and they hold on to their faulty ideas and incorrect images even after direct instruction. So how do we think that games can help with this? We believe that games can dispel science misconceptions by providing new, scientifically accurate visualizations that teachers can refer to and draw from during instruction. In our instructional model, the gameplay serves as preparation for future learning, and I believe that this was talked about quite a bit in the earlier sessions this morning. Gameplay takes place at home prior to instruction and serves as a shared experience among students. The games that we develop don't teach the content directly. Rather, they prepare students for instruction by providing them with visualizations, as I said, of abstract scientific processes and allowing them to interact with those processes directly. So for example, our first module is about photosynthesis, and the idea that plants grow by transforming carbon dioxide and water molecules into glucose molecules is really hard for students to imagine. It's almost impossible. I don't know what that was. Someone's cell phone is ringing. Should I get it? That would be interesting. Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, the process of photosynthesis is almost impossible for a lot of people to visualize. And because of this, students typically hold on to the misconception that plants get their mass from eating soil. So even after they learn about photosynthesis in school, students often hold on to this incorrect idea. So like all our games, our photosynthesis game is designed to provide students, as I said, with an alternative, scientifically accurate visualization. This is a screenshot from the game, and during gameplay, students engage repeatedly in activities that are analogous to those that are involved in photosynthesis. What you see here is that students have to use energy from the sun to break up water molecules and carbon dioxide molecules and then reconfigure them into a glucose molecule. Now, we don't expect students to know what they're doing as they play. To students, they're just doing these things so that they could advance in the game. And this game, Ruby Realm, is a maze adventure game in which students have to build and use these molecules in order to move a robot through a cave. So we don't expect them to learn the science by playing this game, but we do expect them to come away from gameplay with a visualization of a process that mimics photosynthesis. The teacher's role is to then use class time to draw connections between what happens in the game and the target science concepts. And the additional materials and activities that we provide assist teachers in making these connections. In the bottom right here, what you see is an image from one of our PowerPoints that incorporates images from the game to explain the process of photosynthesis. At this point in our study, we're about to complete our 4th year of the 5-year project. So at this point, we've had extensive opportunities to refine our instructional model and to see how it plays out in middle school classrooms. So I'll talk about our first test of it, which was with our photosynthesis module. This study took place during the 2010 to 2011 school year, and it involved 4 public middle schools in the Northeast United States. We worked with 11 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers who had a total of 496 students. And at each site, the implementation of our instructional sequence took between 2 and 2.5 weeks. The instructional sequence itself involved first at-home gameplay. Students required their students to play the game for homework for at least 30 minutes. And then this at-home gameplay was followed by regular classroom instruction in which teachers taught their photosynthesis content as they normally would, using some or all of the materials that we provided. After this, they implemented a linking activity which was designed to help them make explicit connections between what happened in the game and the photosynthesis content. In the case of this module, our linking activity is called Molecules in Motion, in which students were assigned in class to play the role of a carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen atom, and they had to move around the room, linking up with other kids to form the reactants and products of photosynthesis. And finally, in our instructional sequence is a transfer task, which is a consolidation activity in which students are put in a position to apply their knowledge of photosynthesis in a novel context. And I can talk more about that if people are interested. Now, we had several research questions going into this field trial, but the most important thing that it meant for us was a lot of time in the classroom to see how our instructional model played out. We wanted to see how teachers bridged the game and normal instruction, and whether and how the game was useful as a shared prior experience for teachers and students. We also wanted to know how providing students with expensive digital devices would play out on such a large scale. So, would students be responsible with these devices? Would schools be willing to even give it to students to take home in the first place? And of course, is it possible to create some more crossover between the tools that students often use in the quote-unquote real world and the tools that teachers use to support core instruction and learning? So in terms of the logistical reality of the instructional model, it proved to be quite viable. Initially, there were concerns among teachers and among administrators about letting the kids loose with the DSs, and these concerns really turned out to be unfounded. We distributed them cautiously to 496 students, and maybe 2 or 3 of them were lost, and very few were damaged in the process. So it is a viable thing to do. Also, as I said, we designed the games to be played for homework so that instructional time wouldn't be sacrificed. But we were concerned about what teachers' responses would be. Would they assign it for homework? Would teachers actually come into class having played the game? And what we found is that kids came into class having played the game for an average of 70 minutes, which far exceeded the 30 minutes that we recommended. Now, in our case, we don't feel that more time playing equals more learning, but what it does mean is that students were exposed to the molecule-making activities dozens of times, and therefore had exposure to the metaphor that teachers could reference during instruction. And finally, in terms of the logistical reality of the model, we found that it was an adaptive model where it accommodated a wide range of teachers' needs. Some of our teachers had a lot of flexibility in terms of what they taught and when they taught it. Other teachers really were tied to a particular curriculum and a very specific set of learning goals, in particular preparing students for standardized tests. And what we were pleased to see is that our module and the instructional model had sort of something for all of those teachers. It really accommodated all of their needs. In terms of bridging the game and the learning goals, our findings also suggest that the instructional model is viable in that the game provided a shared experience and the appropriate prior knowledge that teachers could reference during instruction. So I'll mention a few things that we saw that suggest that gameplay enabled students to visualize concepts that were previously inaccessible. And first, it seems that gameplay helps students visualize the chemical structures of photosynthesis. Having played the game in which students broke molecules apart and reconfigured them again and again into glucose molecules, we saw that in class, students constructed glucose molecules from memory. They did this in interactive whiteboards. They did this using carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen cards. And when teachers used our PowerPoint that had images of the game to illustrate the process of photosynthesis, students immediately recognized the process and were able to describe it. So the game provided a level of familiarity with the abstract process. And a major advantage of this, we feel, is that it put teachers in a better position to communicate that the atoms in that glucose molecule are the same atoms that were originally in the water and the carbon dioxide molecules. And this is an important concept that a lot of students often have trouble with, realizing that it's the same substances that are merely reconfigured. So the game gave kids a familiarity that teachers could build on to help them understand a concept that had been previously abstract and inaccessible. Also, it seems that the game enabled students to visualize the photosynthesis process. What we heard from teachers, not surprisingly, is that their students typically shut off when they show something like this during their unit on photosynthesis. And this photosynthesis equation is typically something that kids have to memorize. But when teachers showed this equation after gameplay, what they told us is that students were able to make quick sense of it and to explain what it was about. So perhaps what we hope is because the game allowed students to actually do photosynthesis by moving the structures around to form new molecules, they were able to build a deep conceptual understanding of what was going on in that process. And finally, it seems the game helped students recognize the importance of glucose. Students said year after year, even after their units on photosynthesis, students tended to hold on to the idea that the purpose of photosynthesis was to create oxygen, while the glucose molecule is merely a byproduct of that. Kids who played the game, however, and therefore constructed glucose again and again, recognized glucose as the important product of photosynthesis. So in terms of implications of this study, we feel that the viability of our instructional model is good news for those who are interested in the potential to use games for learning and in the potential to use mobile devices for learning in particular. So the fact that the DSs were cautiously distributed on such a wide scale, on such a large scale without any problems, suggests that other devices, such as tablets, can also be used in this way. The field test also demonstrated that if you're addressing an issue that matters to teachers, in this case helping them teach concepts that they recognize as particularly hard to teach, there's an openness to experiment. We really didn't confront much resistance from teachers or from principals during this process, or from parents in that matter. Somebody mentioned that earlier. So there really is an openness to experiment if you're appealing to their specific needs. Gameplay was also successful as a preparation for future learning. It gave kids a shared experience that teachers and students can draw upon to make sense of a complex and abstract phenomenon. And our model provided a way to make better use of instructional time. So as is the case in the flipped classroom model, where students watch videos or look at PowerPoints for homework, at-home gameplay can help prepare students for classroom instruction and establish a more productive relationship between in-classroom and out-of-classroom learning experiences. So I'll stop there. I guess just to sort of briefly fast forward to the present day. As I said, this study took place during the 2010 to 2011 school year. And during this school year, 2011 to 2012, we've done 2 more field tests of our second game module, which is about genetics, and our third game module, which is about electricity. We're currently in development of our 4th module, which is about heat transfer, and we'll be doing that field test in the fall. In addition, during this school year, we're about to finish a randomized control trial of this first module about photosynthesis. So we're going to delve into the data soon, but I can't really talk about that. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi, can you just talk about what was the decision process in deciding to go on a platform like the DSI versus maybe computer on the web?
Sure. I mean, so we're in the 4th year of a 5-year program. So at the time that this proposal was written, that was a great idea, right? So that was, 5 years ago at this point. We think that moving forward and an effort that we're making now is to try to transfer all of this over to a tablet, and those are becoming obviously more widely used in classrooms. So that is something that we're working on now, as well as developing web-based versions of everything.
I'm wondering if you can share any anecdotes or have any things more that you can say about how the teachers reacted to using the games, both as homework and then in the classroom. And I'm particularly interested if the teachers were able to share their work with each other as professional development or ongoing learning.
Sure. I should have mentioned there were 6 hours of training prior to this study. So we did 6 hours of in-person training with the different teachers. And I would say, as I mentioned briefly before, these teachers really did have a wide range of instructional needs. I would say 4 of the teachers, at least 4 of the teachers really were tied to a very specific curriculum and were extremely focused on preparing students for the Regents exams. And they didn't have any, I don't think, prior experience with gameplay on a personal level or using it in the classroom. So I think there was a little bit of hesitation in the beginning, but they also recognized that the concepts that they wanted to teach in their photosynthesis unit they really weren't getting across as well as they wanted to. So there was definitely an openness to exploring it. I would say that in practice, those teachers who were the sort of standardized test-focused people they used our accompanying materials a little more selectively than the teachers who had more flexibility in terms of what they taught. So when it came to our PowerPoint, they would, pick and choose a few slides that they felt really got the points across that they wanted, whereas teachers in some of the other sites or in other classrooms wanted to use sort of the whole thing and have the full experience. And that's one example. So some of the teachers decided that the linking activity really didn't do it for them, so they adapted it in several ways, where instead of they were worried just about kids wandering around the room, linking up with other students would just lead to chaos because they knew their students well, or they just didn't feel like they thought it was a waste of time. So they adapted it in different ways, such as by having them do that on using index cards on tables or things like that. Oh, absolutely, and some of these teachers were from the same school. And for the most part, teachers who were from the same school and the same department within the school sort of wanted to stay on track with each other. So it was another way for them to collaborate, I guess. And also because we couldn't provide DSs for all of the students in the school or in the grade. Some teachers made efforts to, after students that were in the study did it for homework, they would charge them and have students in their other classes play it during class time or during study hall or during lunch. So there was sort of a culture of collaboration that was created.
I had a question. Oh, I'm over here. Thank you so much for this. Really, it's very interesting study, and I'm very interested in the idea of transfer. And this is a really wonderful illustration of how you've taken this process of transfer from the game to the classroom. So do you have any best practices or things that you could draw out of your experience about how you constructed the transfer activities?
I wish I could talk more about that. I think one thing that we definitely learned, and I hope this addresses your question a little bit, is that the professional development is really important in terms of, particularly actually with our genetics module, where I think the connections between the gameplay and the curricular content is not a stretch, but I think that there has to be more scaffolding and support that's provided to teachers in terms of when and how might be best to make the connections between gameplay and the science content. I feel like I'm not answering your question, but I think the biggest implications from this study went back not to refine the game, but to refine the surrounding materials that we worked with teachers, and teachers were very much involved in that process. That was another thing. So this was sort of a pilot for the randomized controlled trial that happened this year. So teachers were very much involved during and after that study in terms of telling us what was really challenging for them, where did they need support, what should we make more explicit in terms of how they can connect the game and the content. In terms of, I don't know if this, I don't think you meant this in terms of transfer, but we are very interested also in how they might transfer the knowledge that they get from this, students might get from this experience to sort of other areas in the curriculum, either later that year or in future years, and that's something that we really hope to explore more moving forward, either through a longitudinal study or something like that. Okay, thank you very much.